Hi everyone, Sue Harper here. Special shout out to the Watercolor Learning Forum. I'm doing this for you guys, you know. What I don't do for you people, I swear. Anyway, I've been asked so many times about stretching paper that I've gotten tired of typing the answer. So I'm making this little video to give you a demonstration on how to do it. Sometimes it just sinks in better if you can see it. Anyway, you need several things. You need paper, obviously. I'm using Arch's 140-pound cold press paper. It's got lots of sizing in it, and sizing is what keeps the paper from absorbing too much paint. If it didn't have sizing in it, it's just cotton rag. It would take watercolor like a t-shirt. You just have a tie-dyed piece of paper. So they put sizing in it so that the color in the water won't be absorbed so quickly into the cotton. But Arches has a lot, and I need to take some of it out. Now, you'll need the paper, you need a board. This little board is a gator board. I have little tiny gator boards. See these little skinny? This is only 1/8 of an inch. It's a little cheaper than the 3/4 or 1/2 inch gator board, and it's not necessary to have such a thick board. I've discovered that this skinny little board will take a large piece of watercolor paper, and it won't buckle. It won't snap the board. It will not bend the board. It's little, but it's strong. And so I've got my small board. I have a piece of paper that's about 1 inch smaller around than the board. Now, if you don't want to tape your paper to the board, let's say you have a piece of paper that's just this size. It's just exactly the size of the board, and you don't want to go the step higher to get a big board to have enough room on the outside for taping. Go ahead and staple it. These little boards will take staples over and over and over again. I've used them for years. They get a little banged up looking, but hey, you know, looks aren't everything. So they work just fine. So you want your paper, you want your board. You want tape. This is water-activated mailing tape. This is posting tape. And you can buy it in an art store, or you can buy it at Michael's, or you can probably get it at a postal company, or you can get it at, you know, where they sell the moving boxes and all that, storage companies. You could probably pick it up there. So that's what it is. It's for taping up boxes. And it's strong, but it's brown, and I really don't care for the brown color on my rim of my paper. It distracts me while I'm mixing colors, so I prefer not to use it. I do like to use this. It's a white water-activated tape. The only place I've ever found it was Jerry's Art Aroma. I do not get any royalties from advertising it, but I really like it, and it's thinner, it's white, so it doesn't get in my way, and I like it a lot. It's very economical. It doesn't take much to tape down your paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of paper for each side. This is rocket science now. This is very complicated business. So watch carefully what I'm doing here. Yeah. Okay, here's the long side. Here's the short side. And another short side. Alright, now these get put over here, out of the way. This gets rolled back up, nice and neat, put back in its plastic bag, because you don't want this little roll of tape anywhere near a water source or where there's water splashing around, because one drop of water on the side of that and you've ruined the whole tape. Guess who's done that? Your friendly rocket scientist. Okay, so we have our tape cut, we have our paper, we have our board, Now we need water. Now, this is my water source. Isn't that lovely? I have a beautiful studio that I love. It's separate from my home. My husband built it for me. But we ran out of water before, we ran out of money before we got water in the studio. So I have a watercolor studio with no water source. But we make do. I bring my water in from inside, and so I do things a little differently. If you were at home, and in your home, in your house, you could just soak your piece of paper in a sink, in the bathtub, depending on how large it was, and you could soak it for 10 minutes. It doesn't even have to be that long. Just enough time for some of the sizing to dissolve into the water. Now, I don't have that, so I have to sort of get rid of my sizing a little differently. I'm going to wet, whoops, I'm going to wet the whole table. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wet my paper. I'm going to put quite a bit of water on there. And this is on the back side. This is on the back side of my paper, I think. You can paint on both sides of the paper. It's just that one side has a little bit more texture on it than the other. But they're perfectly capable of taking the paint. And I'm going to wet that really well. And I'm going to let the water sit on there a little bit. So I want some of it to dissolve that sizing. Okay. And then I'm going to soak up some of the sizing with a paper towel so I can get it away from the paper. Then I'm going to wet a little bit again. Okay, get it wet evenly, and then I'm going to turn it over and position it where I want it on the paper. Now if this was a larger piece of paper, you would be able to see this start to buckle right away. I don't know if you can see that. Where am I? I'm off center here. I don't know if you can see it buckling. Smaller pieces of paper don't seem to cause so much trouble so early on, but if you had a large piece of paper, you see that start to buckle and heave right away. Don't pay any attention to it. When it's dry, it will be flat. So we're going to put the water on the other side. I'm going to do the same thing and pick up some of the water and sizing. Now, as you can see, my little method here is effective in that I get my paper stretched. It doesn't take a whole lot of sizing out. That's all right. It takes enough out for what I want to do. And I'm going to wet it again. Get it good and damp. Okay. Now, I'm going to make sure that the board is wet as well as the paper. Because this paper is so thin, it doesn't need to be wet. If you wet this paper with a brush or a sponge and then put it on wet board and paper, you might get too much water and end up taking out the glue. It dissolves it so badly that it won't stick. So we're going to put pay no attention to that crazy sound in the background. That's my telephone, and it's yet another telemarketer, I'm sure. We're going to put our paper down, run a piece of towel across the top of it. Now I'm going to make sure that the ends of those papers are wet because I'm going to put the next piece down. And our next here on the board. Paper towel that's not already soaked. All right. Another advantage advantage of putting that tape onto the wet paper and the wet board instead of wetting the tape is that you're less likely to get glue dripping into the painting surface, which you don't want because the paper won't take the paint properly if it's got glue sitting on it. So there we are. We've got stretched paper. Now, stay down. This needs to dry flat. If you tip it, you will end up having the water sliding down the paper, and it won't dry evenly. So you want to dry it flat without any artificial means. No heat, no hair dryers, just let it dry by itself. Now it may take overnight. That's okay. You can have a day where you prepare several pieces of paper and they're ready to go whenever you want to paint something. So just leave it overnight, and when it's totally dry, you can paint on it. Just leave it taped to the board and paint on it as you would normally. And when you're finished and the paper is totally dry, you take a utility knife, pierce the tape underneath the watercolor paper and slide it along and pull the paper off. When the paper is off and it's still on the edges of the paper, just leave it on the edges of your watercolor paper. It won't do any harm. It'll add stability to the piece of paper, and you won't see it under the matting and the framing anyway, so it doesn't matter. What's left on the board, you can spritz with some water, let it sit for a minute, and then slide it off. And your board's ready to go for another piece of paper. So thanks for joining me. This was fun, and I hope it's helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.